Ready.
Welcome to episode 64 of the Go Get 'em Agility podcast. My name is Margaret Hughes and I'm your host. Today I want to talk a little bit about playing it safe versus pushing for more, seeing what you may actually get from your dog. If I was to take down my training as an instructor versus being a student or being with my students, one of the main factors, one of the main differences in how we approach the day's agenda is I want to see growth in my dogs and my handlers, and my students want to see it right. Let that sink in. I want to see growth. I want to see change. I want to see movement towards a new goal. And a good chunk of my students just want to get it right, which is possible, right? I mean, we can always play it safe. And so when we're playing it safe, when we're trying to go for correctness, when we're trying to not have the dog make any mistakes, sometimes we miss out on pushing the envelope, seeing what our dogs may actually know by taking a risk, by going for more distance, by going for a verbal where our position may be out of place, by going for adding in distractions. As an instructor, I have the advantage of seeing a lot of dogs be successful when their handlers really didn't think they could be. And sometimes I'm taken back, like, you didn't think your dog could do that? When I was pretty much betting on them, betting a high amount of dollars that they would. I think the main difference is if I lost the bet, if the dog didn't get it, I wouldn't be distraught about it. I would put it down in my journal, in my mental journal, maybe even a physical journal. We need to fix that. We need to train for more. We need to help the dog understand that they can do it. We've got a training gap, and I would love to go back in there and fix it. I would love to go back in there and create some more clarity for the dogs so that they can do it in the future. When I have handlers, they almost instinctively go the route to make it right. And if you've trained with me for any length of time, you are well aware that if you do it one way, I'll ask you to do it a different way the next time. Because I want to see growth. I want to make sure that the dog and the handler try to work outside of their comfort zone and gain the skills so that if they're presented with their uncomfort zone in a trial, it actually gives them comfort, right? And sometimes when we're training, we need to go for it when we're not even sure if it's going to work. To the risk of the dog getting it wrong, we want to go for it. One thing that you may want to ask yourself when you're training, and definitely when you're trialing, but something that you may want to ask yourself when you're training is, are you working on a dog skill or are you working on a handler skill? And sometimes there's a combo of both. But a good chunk of the time, you can lay it down to dog training. I need to build distance. I need to build duration. I need to build distractions. Or you're working on a handler skill, timing, footwork, cue orientation. So what cues are you using when? And when you can start to label whether it's a dog training problem or a handler training problem, then you may be able to pull apart how to make it work for both you and your dog. So we were working on all of our side changes yesterday on a certain ending of a sequence. And my students came up with 8 different ways to handle the same sequence in 5 jumps. We were working 4 jumps. Tunnel, jump, jump, jump. And there were 8 different ways to handle it that they figured out. One of them, I suggested they don't do it. I thought it would have us calling 911. But the other 7 were 100% doable. And so when we were talking about the different 7, some of them came down to dog skill, and some of them came down to handler skill. And learning the difference is helpful. Why would we be closer to our dog in a given sequence as opposed to further away? What was required to be further away? And the pitfalls of being further away, and the pitfalls of being closer. So we discussed all of those different strategies, and then we ran several of them. And each time we either worked towards perfecting or making easier clarity, understanding any given side change scenario. So either understanding for the dog or understanding for the handler, trying to realize how our line, our placement, our speed affected the dog's path. Were they jumping in the extension? Did they know that a turn was coming? And so we worked through several of them, and we figured out some that were like, yep, that's my go-to move. I like that move. My dog likes that move. We both know it very well. And then we went through some, that makes me slightly uncomfortable. My dog wasn't 100% sure, and working through it to help our dogs understand you can do this as well, and helping my handlers to understand you can also do this as well. You have the skills to be able to pull off a move that you normally wouldn't pull off, and helping my handlers to understand how their position directly affects their dog's jumping, their dog's turning, their dog's acceleration, or their dog's deceleration. But it took putting some of my students in an uncomfortable position to show them that they could do it, that they actually do have the skills to pull it off, even if it isn't their first go-to move. Some of my students were shocked by the distance and the commitment that their dogs showed in their skills, and that they could send to a weave pull entrance that was much further than they had trained for, and without a lot of support, that was a pure distance weave pull entry independent skill that they never knew they had. And I guess that's why they come to class. They're asking me to set these scenarios up to show them where they can and need more training, where they can go, and if they weren't able to get the distance, what they could do to help train for distance, what they could do to help train for independence. And the dogs, once they had clarity, they were nailing it. So it was a lot of fun to see. But what I want you to take away from this podcast is that if you're always helping your dog to be right, if you're always setting up the scenario to be correct, then you may not be pushing outside of your comfort zone and allowing your dog to show you that they can do harder, that they can do more distance, that they can do more speed potentially. And so when we were finding mistakes, when our dogs were finding a pocket that, what I call, where's the dog broken? So there's a distance at which it no longer works. And so when we're working towards distance, when we're working for harder angles and jump effort or weave pull effort, when we're working for harder or asking for more from our dogs in distance, duration, distraction, I like to find where my dog's broken. So for example, let's say it's 5 feet off the weave pulls. At 5 feet, my dog cannot get a certain type of entrance. But at 4 feet, they can. So they're comfortable at 4 feet. They're uncomfortable at 5 feet. I try and find that middle ground 4.5 feet and see if they can do that. And what I do is when they get it correct, I take a step back. And if they get it incorrect, I try it again. And if they still get it incorrect, then I take a step forward. So I work within a parameter of 3 to 5 reps. And if my dog gets it correct on rep 1, I make it harder on rep 2. If they get rep 2 incorrect, I try rep 2 again. I try the location of rep 2 again. If they get it incorrect on rep 3, then I go halfway between rep 1 and 2. And if they get it incorrect again, I go back to rep 1. So the location that was working. And I continue that process until my dog gets it correct. If they get it correct, I take a step back. They get it correct again, I take another step back. They get it correct again, I take another step back. And you will find a point at which it's broken. And you may do this dance between 5 to 7 feet over and over and over again, going forward, backwards, forward, backwards, forward, backwards. And eventually the dog, and breaks in between, all of that. But eventually the dog goes, oh, I get it. And what's important, especially when you're working weed pulls or even jump training, is that when you're adding that distance, that you're rewarding for the behavior that they are doing correct. So for weed pulls, the behavior is going out and finding the first 2 pulls correctly, not doing all 6. And so I will reward for pulls 1 and 2. I'll pull my dog out and drop a cookie right on their path to tell them they're right. And I'll do that multiple times, and then I'll try for all 6 again, see, do I still have it? And sometimes it breaks the dogs for a little bit on 6, but eventually they will work through that. I call it goes through the washing machine, and it all gets mixed up. It all's kind of messy together. And then all of a sudden the wash is over, you pull out your shirt and it's clean. And that's how dog training works. It kind of all gets mushed together. And then at the end of the day, the dog can sit on that, think about it. And when you try it again the next day or the next week, you may be shocked that it worked. Latent learning is a very powerful tool. Latent learning is learning that happens when the dog is not actively training, when they're at rest. So the point of my podcast is to push the envelope, is to see what your dog can do, find their broken spot and train at that broken spot. Always going for correctness, always going for, I want this to work, is not always the answer. And I think that dog training is always about going further in your skills if there's more to do, right? And then they'll come to a point where, okay, that's far enough. I don't need to go any further. But I always like to try and train way further than my ability at a trial. Putting it all together at a trial can be a whole different ballgame and tricky unto itself. But building in those skills for the dog is important to me. And my handling skills will eventually catch up. But the more the dog knows and the more I trust that the dog knows it, the more I can utilize that further down the line. I think that's it. Happy training. Woof, woof.
Ready.